prisoner who has long paid for his
Welcome back to
crime,
the Paul Harrell
but is
program.
there
This is
because
Richard Castor filling in for Paul while he's turkey hunting. We have on the phone with me a great friend, a student at Hillsdale College, just got accepted into Hillsdale College's Graduate School of Statesmanship, Mr. Paul Mittermeier. Paul, how are you doing this morning or afternoon?
I am well, Richard. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. Everyone listening, if you're just tuning in, my name is Richard Castor. I'm broadcasting out of Mountain Talk Studios in Mountain Home, Arkansas, up here in north central Arkansas in the Ozark Mountains. We are filling in for Paul, and we're talking about Arkansas issues. But we wanted to kind of answer the question why we believe what we believe. And that's really kind of the main purpose of Hillsdale College and their outreach that they do across the nation. You've heard of Hillsdale College on Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Sean Hannity. They got commercials on Fox News and everywhere in between. And they're famous because they accept no federal funds. And
right.
they teach what is truth, not what one party wants them to, not what they feel like, but they make the argument and fight for what is actually true. And isn't that the special thing about Hillsdale, Paul?
That is, one of the most unique things about Hillsdale, I think, is the emphasis that Hillsdale places on the American founding as the culmination of the Western tradition, which Hillsdale maintains is embodied in the Judeo-Christian and the Greco-Roman traditions. So they really try to assess contemporary political issues, contemporary economic issues in the context or through the lens of what would the founders have thought, what would all of these people who have contributed to the development of the West and the Western tradition, what would they have thought about this? So it lends a certain philosophic spirit, and it lends a certain spirit in which we very, very highly prize personal freedom and liberty, as the founders did.
Absolutely. And in that personal freedom and personal liberty, you have a lot of thinkers like John Locke and Thomas Aquinas who help guide us and kind of have struggled with these questions before and can lead us to answers. And that's really true when we talk about privacy, right, Paul? We it's not, do we have, let me ask you that, do we have a right to privacy?
Well, I think we would, and I think you're right to bring up John Locke. And just so that your listeners are aware, if you haven't been talking about him already, John Locke is one of the figures who most seminally impacted the American founding. He wrote a book which is unfortunately not taught as much as it should be in this day and age, called The Second Treatise on Government. It's actually part of his two treatises on government. And this book was one of the works that most impacted the American founding. And in it, he talks all about the rights as a basis for the establishment of civil society. He says that by virtue of our very nature, we retain certain rights to life, liberty, and property. And this, of course, sounds very familiar because we hear in our own founding documents that we have certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Locke says that the protection of these rights is the only just function of government, and it's the only reason we create it in the first place. And as part of that, Locke would say, I think, that we have a certain property in our person, which is why property rights are so integral and why they must be protected, because property begins in the person. And so if you take that sort of prescription, if you believe that your person is truly yours in the sense that any property would be yours, then that's something that you have jurisdiction and autonomy over. And as such, it's something that the integrity of which cannot be violated. So I think that would be a very, very strong case for an existence of privacy rights in nature within the human person.
Absolutely. And so then we have down here in Arkansas, Paul, where are you? Let's go there. Where are you from? You're from Cincinnati, Ohio, and you're studying at Hillsdale College in Michigan. And how old are you?
That's right. I am 22. I just got accepted, as you mentioned, into Hillsdale's Graduate School of Statesmanship. So I will be pursuing my master's in political theory here at Hillsdale. I'm from Cincinnati. I've been involved in city politics and state politics in Ohio for a long time, most notably as it pertains to education and the restoration of local control, the repeal of Common Core. So that's just a little bit of my personal background. And, of course, I've been friends with you for a number of years, Richard.
Absolutely. Paul and I go way back. We are proudly responsible for the rise and fall of our old fraternity. And something we like to joke about. So down here in Arkansas, we are legislative session has ended, the normal session, but they just didn't get to raise enough taxes as much as they wanted to. So why not call it a special session? Why not? Why shouldn't they re-meet here in a few months or in a few weeks? And it looks like they may start considering House Bill 1388 by State Representative Dan Douglas and State Senator Jake Files. This bill would make out-of-state online stores report your name, where you shopped online, the amount, and the address of where you had the item sent every time you buy anything online. They want to use this personal information to collect a tax that has always been uncollectible. They want to go after you and potentially sue you to collect this tax on anything you buy, even as on this article I'm reading from the Conduit for Action, even a toy you bought online for your child or grandchild. Of course, we can go on about taxes and why taxes are bad, and we want them lowered, not higher. But this is an invasion of privacy. And it really, when you think about what you buy online and your online footprint, you can learn anything from your religious views, political views, your health concerns, even things that are awkward to talk about, like sexual preference. Anything that you find private in your personal life that you decide you want to buy on the internet. Now, these companies, if they want to sell to you in Arkansas, are going to have to keep all that information on you and then give it to the state government. Talk about an infringement on that really important thing we talked about earlier, Paul, privacy.
It really is outrageous, Richard. And if the federal government has taught us anything in recent years, whether it is by virtue of the activities of the NSA or whether it's by virtue of Hillary Clinton's operation of different, technology that's in the hands of the government, especially with regard to privacy, we've learned that the government is an absolute failure when it comes to this. And it should not be a surprise because, first of all, the government inherently continues to violate privacy rights. But not only that, if you think about something like this, even putting aside the question of whether or not this is just, putting aside the question of whether or not it's acceptable for the government to, engage in these sorts of activities that mine data, one thing that we can be certain of from the government's track record is that it is quite plausible that our data will not be secure and that there very much exists the possibility for a breach to occur or for, even in a much more of a legal or in a predictable sense, it to be sold to third-party vendors or something like that. So to put this sort of data in the hands of the government is not only fundamentally unjust, I would contend, but disastrous even by the government's own standards.
Absolutely. We talked during the Edward Snowden scandal where we learned that the federal government was collecting all of our internet searches, all of our emails and text messages and phone calls to each other. And you felt crazy to say it, but you said to yourself, well, you could write a really cool novel having really bad people in charge of the NSA and using that information to influence political elections, right? To have this information to leak it out and to say, oh, he bought this, he visited this website. With legislation like this, where the government collects what you buy, when you bought it, how much it was, where you shipped it to, I mean, you're asking for blackmail. You're asking for people to sell your information. You're asking for, these angelic government workers who are just going to hold on to this information and they're not going to hurt you with it, which is craziness, right? Am I crazy or is this bill crazy?
No, I don't think so. I think the bill is fundamentally despotic. And I think, to be quite honest, that to use a word that our founders would not have thrown around so lightly, I think it is despotic. And I think not only that, but it does not just undermine the personal the privacy of the individuals whose data is going to be mined by way of this legislation. It undermines the integrity and the privacy that should accompany a right to contract. When you engage in a transaction with a business, you are engaging in a sort of contract with that business, and there's an integrity to that contract wherein you have your privacy and the entity with whom you're contracting, in this case, whatever business you're shopping at, has their privacy, and you enter into a transaction that is of mutual benefit and of self-interest in the marketplace. and it's a free exchange. It's something that should be private if the entities desire that it should be private, and this is something that attacks and undermines that. And that's not something that just individuals in Arkansas, and I think rightfully so, would be affronted by. It's also something that businesses outside the state of Arkansas are going to be affronted by. And I wonder what exactly Arkansas's legislators are thinking this is going to do for business in their state. I wonder if they genuinely believe that these businesses are going to appreciate having the data ripped right out of their hands, and if it's going to make them more apt to engage in business in Arkansas. If anything, it seems like this is not only going to undermine the privacy of the individual, the privacy of the business or entity with whom the individual is trading, and the privacy of their mutual contract, but it's also going to discourage and absolutely kill business in Arkansas because companies are not going to want to submit to these tyrannical rules.
Absolutely. I mean, I can just imagine 1,000 websites that say offer not valid in the state of Arkansas. Right? That's
right,
what will happen.
Right.
Businesses aren't going to hire a new accountant just to make our state representatives happy and fill their coffers. That's not how the free market works, my friends. The government can't compel these businesses to do this. So, go ahead.
And in an era where, especially with the rise of Donald Trump, there has been such an emphasis on the creation of jobs and the re-empowerment of those who have been so disenfranchised across the past number of years, it would seem that this really, really runs against the grain, especially those who would call themselves part of the Republican Party or allies, in a sense, of Donald Trump. And so I think that perhaps those who voted for Donald Trump in your state ought to really consider whether or not this sort of coincides with the direction that Donald Trump is moving, and whether it's actually going to be profitable for Arkansas, and whether it's going to, generate a profit and create more jobs in the state of Arkansas. And maybe it seems that the party establishment is out of line with that direction, and maybe it seems that it needs to be adjusted in that sense.
Absolutely. We do love adjusting the party establishment. So now everyone listening knows to call your state senator or state representative and tell them that HB 1388 is despotic. And Paul Mittermeier told you so.
Right.
So, Paul, we got 5 minutes before I got to go to break. So, Judge Gorsuch gave his first ruling yesterday, and it actually impacted the state of Arkansas, allowing for the death penalty to be followed through with. Arkansas right now is trying to execute 8 men convicted of different murders decades ago over an 11-day period because our supply of medicine is about to go bad, this medicine that kills. And so we've had Johnny Depp, all these celebrities literally coming to Arkansas saying, you people are supposedly Christian. How do you support the death penalty? We've had Catholic priests saying you can't be Catholic and support the death penalty. Go at him, Paul. What say you?
Well, I think more importantly, the question is what says the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and what say a number of prominent Catholic theologians, philosophers, and thinkers who have impacted the Church's development. And to that, I would ask them to turn to none other than St. Thomas Aquinas, who actually does provide a certain justification, with qualification, of course, for capital punishment. And I think they ought to be very, very careful about the way that the Catholic Church has traditionally approached this issue. The Church has always been cautious of capital punishment, and of course, the Church has always stipulated that if it can be avoided, and if there are alternative means that are going to be better for both the individual and society, then those should be pursued. However, there is a very, very broad misconception out there that the Catholic Church, without exception, is opposed to capital punishment. That is actually not the case. And St. Thomas Aquinas, in his Summa Theologica, he discusses this a little bit. He says that, if somebody has committed some sort of atrocity or deed that is against the common good of society, and by the way, as a qualifier, the protection of the common good of that society is the just and sole function of government, according to St. Thomas Aquinas. So if somebody has performed a deed that undermines that, then it is perfectly valid for them to be executed. Now, of course, that sounds broad, But the way in which Aquinas qualifies this is he says there are certain deeds that people can perform, namely when you violate things like life and liberty and those sorts of things, wherein you render yourself less than human. You literally undermine the integrity of your own human nature, is what Aquinas tells us, and that in so doing, you render yourself less than human and akin to the animals. And as such, then, you can be utilized, or you can be treated, in a sense, the way that the animals are treated in society if you forfeit or if you cede your own human nature by acting in a way that's contrary to it or by acting in a way that's animalistic. And so when you do that, when you lower yourself to the realm of beast instead of the realm of man, that is when Aquinas says it is perfectly justifiable for you to be executed because you have diametrically opposed yourself to the common good of society. So there is certainly grounds for it, I think, in the Catholic Church. Of course, Aquinas would take this a little bit further and say that heretics are contrary to the common good, which I don't know if we if we necessarily want to take it to that extent. But I think the point being is that there certainly is grounds within Catholic theology for it, although we must be cautious about it and note that if there's a way in which we can allow time for someone to repent, or if there's a better way to do it, then we should pursue that option. But this narrative that there is no room in the Catechism or in any Catholic doctrine for capital punishment.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so we're going to head to a commercial break. On that note, we're going to stay on the phone with Paul Mittermeier, and here in a minute, we'll get how you can find out more about him, where you can find him online on Facebook. So stay with us right here on the Paul Harrell Program. Welcome back to the Paul Harrell Program. This is Richard Castor on the phone with Paul Mittermeier. Paul, we got 1 minute. How can people reach out to you to ask you questions and find out more about you and your life up there at Hillsdale College right now?
Sure, yeah. Well, I am available on Facebook, which you can find me on there by simply searching my name. It's Paul, Mittermeier, on Facebook, or on Twitter at _Paul, Paul, like a politician. So feel free to find me either way, or if you have any questions about political theory, political philosophy, what would the founders or St. Thomas Aquinas say? Feel free to get in touch.
Wonderful, Paul. Thank you. We wish you all the luck as finals are approaching your senior year and entering into the Graduate School of Statesmanship at Hillsdale College. Really proud of you, Paul. You represent us well up there.
Thank you again. Thanks so much for having me on, and I do wish Arkansas the best of luck in defeating that despotic violation of privacy rights.
Absolutely. He's talking about HB 1380H, the bill that would force businesses to collect your personal information, then give it to the state so they can raise taxes on you again. We're going to be watching.
That's what we call despotism.
Absolutely. All right. We are going to go to a commercial break. This